Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, someone who'd never turned down a good bowl of cereal, Mike Valdes, a singer-songwriter, actor, comedian, and all-around dreamer who is here to talk not only about Childlike At Best with Mike Valdes, but also a crush on, well, it's an interesting one because it's not a person, but rather nostalgia as a whole. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well, Kendra. That was a very sweet intro. I love that.
Everyone always likes their intro. I think it has to do with just watching a lot of TV and talk shows.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great. Well, also, I'm a comedian, so a lot of my intros are always just this next guy he's fine, so it's just anytime somebody says something nice, you're like, wow, this is great.
Coming up next, he's breathing, I guess. Mike Valdes.
Yeah, the human being. There you go.
Yeah. I haven't been to a comedy show in a while since I moved, but yeah, I remember those. You're just could you amp it up a little? Unless they're bringing out somebody Dave Chappelle or something, and you could tell they're
right.
Oh, but yeah. So before we
yeah, of course.
Yeah, before we get started, can you tell people where we can find you online?
Yes. So obviously I'm on Instagram. I'm at Mike Valdes. I'm on TikTok at official Mike Valdes. Some of my TikToks are going dummy viral, so that's okay. And let's see. I think the easiest way to do it is I have a link tree, but I have a website for all of my stuff. And you just go to thekidfromup.com, and that's it. That's the website. Until Disney sues me. Until Disney sues me, that is my website. So that's where you can find everything. I mean, my music is there, my stand-up is there, my podcast, everything.
I bet you get a lot of people just from Googling The Kid from Up.
Right.
They're
well, that's kind of the hope, yeah.
Yeah. What's his name? Russell, maybe?
Yeah.
Mike, you are the first person to come here with a crush that is on an idea instead of a person.
Right.
Were there any people, though, in your mind before you settled on this grand concept of nostalgia?
Well, yes, of course. There's too many people, which I would say was the problem, was and it's something that I emailed you. I said, I'm basically the human embodiment of the CW channel, where I'm just I have a crush on everything and everyone, and even the term crush is kind of a crush in and of itself. It's like an Inception kind of a thing, where it's just which is why I chose this subject that we're talking about. I don't know if we're allowed to say it, but it's this very you have this crush because it's something that in your mind it's perfect, mm-hmm. and if it veers off that perfection, then it becomes something else, and it's not a crush anymore. So that's what's really interesting about it. But to answer your question, sure, I think the first crush I ever had, I was maybe 5 years old, maybe 6, and it was Alicia Silverstone in Clueless.
Oh wow, not a cartoon. Usually first crushes are animated because that's what we're watching most, but Clueless, a great crush.
Right.
All the same. Yeah. I think that was the first movie I saw at a sleepover, so it has a very special place in my heart, and it's just iconic.
Yeah, it's extremely iconic. Yeah, absolutely. All of her outfits, just everything. She was perfect in that movie, and I kind of followed her career after that, and I watched so many bad movies just because she was in them.
That could be the downfall of a crush.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't even think it was Clueless that was the thing that made me fall in love with her. You know what it was? It was the Aerosmith Crying music video. That's what it was.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
A lot, but for a 5 or 6 year old, you have to see a Aerosmith video and find some love.
And
at least it wasn't Steven Tyler. He's old,
right? Well, yeah. Well, he's always been old, but even still, like, I haven't. He's one of those guys. He's like Bob Barker, where like ever since I've been alive, he's just been old, so it doesn't really matter how old he is. But like, but yeah, like. That video is so wild because I'm thinking about this now. You unlock something in my brain that I haven't thought about, which is amazing. When being 5 or 6 years old and watching that video, and like, I mean, in the video, she's like this rebellious type of person. I'm going completely off of memory, so I don't really know. Like, she gets like a piercing in it and like a tattoo or something, and she bungee jumps at the end, and I was like, man, I want a girl like that. And I'm like 6.
Rolling into kindergarten, like, which one are you about to get a tattoo at recess?
Yeah, that's so wild, man. I mean, it explains why. It's very funny. Like, I told my best friend this on a podcast where I was like, my first crush was Alicia Silverstone, and I said, I mean, are you surprised? And he goes, I mean, she seems completely like your type. So it's very funny.
Well, Cher Horowitz aside, who is definitely probably a crush too, probably a top tier 90s kids crush, but we're going to talk about your crush on nostalgia, because I too am a very nostalgic person. I actually just wrapped up this whole series, Crushing on the 90s, where we broke down every year of the 90s. And I feel you on this love and nostalgia, but what age did you start to notice that you had this sort of infatuation with nostalgia in the past?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I know, because I've always this is a weird thing, because even when I was a kid, I guess I was infatuated with the past, because like, when you're a kid, you like to like embellish the truth about certain things, and like that's how a lot of great stories when you're a kid are told. Like, you might have gone to a concert, and to go see like your parents' favorite band or something, but then you're like, no, last night we were backstage at the Backstreet Boys concert.
I wish.
What I mean? And it's like that's not like completely true, but it's also like, you did go to a concert. It was just like, Sticks or something, like with your parents, so in a weird way, like, nostalgia, it's a weird thing, like, and this is something I thought about, where it's just like, somebody said this on a podcast that I do on Childlike At, where they said it kind of trying to be funny, but they were like, what is the reverse of trauma when it's positive? And I said, that's nostalgia. Which is, it's literally the reverse of trauma. So it's just like, it's something that when you think about it, it unlocks amazing memories, and sometimes that's not necessarily always the case, because there's a term that's been coined called nostalgia eyes, where it's like, you'll see a show that you saw when you were a kid, like DuckTales or something, and you watch it now and you're in your 30s, and you're like, this show sucks. And it's like, well, no, it's made for children. And also, the thing that you mostly remember is how great that theme song was.
For me, it's not. I think DuckTales holds up. For me, nostalgia eyes is definitely Gummy Bears. I watched it as soon as I got Disney Plus. I was like, we are putting on all those cartoons, and I was like, okay, Gummy Bears ain't holding up, but the theme song's still amazing.
I mean, the thing I will say, and I mean, especially about this, about Disney afternoon shows, is their theme songs are just outrageously good.
Yeah, they didn't have to go that hard.
Exactly. Like the Goof Troop song is is Boys to Men singing this song? Why do we need there's there's 3 key changes in the Chippendale Rescue Rangers theme song. Like, are you serious? Like, what is the there's barely that many key changes in a normal pop song. Like, that's wild, you know. But yeah, like it's kind of a strange thing. So you kind of, and in a lot of ways, like even with TV and also with another thing too, with snacks, there's a lot of nostalgia snacks that are coming back, and it's kind of a bit that I've been working on stage, where it's like, you know, I went to the grocery store and I realized there's a lot of stuff from when I was a kid that's like just back on the shelf, like 3D Doritos, like, you know, and like Dunkaroos, and you know, the dinosaur egg oatmeal and all that stuff. And it's like, who do we have to thank for that? And it's like, probably because pregnant women are millennials, you know, and like they're just like, we want these things from our childhood, and their husbands or their partners are begging General Mills to bring them back because their wife is going to slit their throat if they don't, you know, like
Dunkaroos came back real hard.
Yeah, no, they did. And that's the other thing too. I don't know if you remember or if you've had them, but if you have them, it just isn't the same. You know, it just isn't the same.
I don't know if it's our taste buds or it's what they're doing, but I mean, I can't eat real sugary cereals anymore. Like, so I'm like, oh no, is it happening? Is this the change?
Well, Kendra, I mean, in all reality, like, this is something I've told. So season 2 of my podcast, Childlike At Best, comes out fairly soon, and our first guest is Jason Marsden from A Goofy Movie. And one of the things that I told him was, when we were kids, we could literally eat radioactive sludge, you know, like, and like now, if we eat a Hostess cupcake, it ruins our day. You know, like,
you gotta have Tums on hand. I always have Tums.
It ruins your day. Right? Yeah. I mean, it stinks getting older, for real. Like, but at the same time, you know, there's little things, you know, like I even say it on stage, where it's just like, you have to have that one thing in your life, and it could be different for everybody, but have that one thing in your life that just reminds you to not lose your sense of childlike wonder, you know. And like, for me, it's eating cereal. Like, I eat clean majority of my life. I eat very clean, but I do tell myself, hey man, every once in a while you're allowed a bowl of cereal because you've been eating clean, you know. And that's my thing, you know. For some people it's cheesecake, for some people it's chocolate cake, whatever, you know. But you gotta let yourself have fun, or else, like, what are you living for, you know?
Exactly. So other than like eating a bowl of cereal, what like period of your life never fails to make you feel the most nostalgic? Is there a grade, an age?
Ooh, that's a great question. I have different answers for every decade. And I have different answers for every grade. Because for example, like, when I was in high school, it was more like, I was more like a punk kid, you know, where like I really liked the bands from Drive Thru Records, and that's when I learned how to play guitar, and I learned how to play piano because I got into a band called Something Corporate, and that's what made me want to start writing music. And so it's very nostalgic in that regard, where that's the reason why I started playing music. But as far as like nostalgia in the sense of seeing something and then being passionate about wanting to, you know, be a part of it, which is, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to be an actor and all that stuff, because once I found out you can make money at playing pretend, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, this is a dream job. You know, like, you're literally just doing what I do every day for free, you know. So it's just like, and really that's what acting is. Like, you're just playing pretend, you know. And so And I think for me that was about 5th or 6th grade. And I think it was because I was going to school, and in my grade was a kid who was on a very popular Nickelodeon show called The Brothers Garcia.
Ooh.
And yeah, it was super fun, and having him in my class and all that stuff kind of made me realize, like, oh, this is possible. Like, it's not like some crazy untangible thing that I can't, because when you're a kid, you're like, the people in the TV are different people and they don't exist. They exist in my TV and that's it, which in a way, a lot of people still think like that, which is why they go nuts when they see Tom Hanks at an airport. You know what I mean? But like, but that's the thing where it's just like, you see, when you're a kid, you just can't separate the two. You don't think those are like real people in a weird way. You just think that they exist in the TV. And that made me realize, like, oh man, like this is actually possible. And so, yeah, I would say around like 5th or 6th grade was around that time. And, I was always very, what's the right word? Energetic is a good word, but I was a performer in a lot of ways. However, like, my family is very Cuban, and part of at least my mom was very like not strict, but like just very like, army. What like everything had to be like exactly, like
Type A.
The exactly. The funny thing is, my mom is every stereotypical dad in like a movie about like the 50s where like a kid has a dream. Like
you're gonna go to college, kid.
Yeah, you're gonna go to college and you're gonna do this and all that. And she is that, which is really, really funny. That's my mom, and my dad is the opposite. My dad is the emotional one, but that's literally what my family dynamic has always been. And so my mom would not like it when I was very performative, because I guess it embarrassed her or something. I'm not really sure. So because of that, it kind of made me this introverted extrovert, where I was this person who, if you told me it was okay to play around, I would do it, but I wouldn't do it unless you told me it was okay. And so, but yeah, which is the difference between a class clown and me, because a class clown is like a kid that just disrupts all the time, and I would say I was more a class comedian, because I would sit in the pocket, and then every once in a while have one or two really funny things to say, and it would even make a teacher laugh,
Mm-hmm.
So that was more who I was.
That's how my brother was. His teachers would tell my mom he's hilarious and he's making me laugh, but it's disrupting. Like, I'm the teacher, so I can't be on his side. So don't have him calm it down. Other thing, which brother from Brothers Garcia was it? Was he the oldest, the youngest, the middle?
He was the middle.
Ooh, my favorite brother Garcia. And then too, shout out for the Drive Through Records shout out. I love that.
Yeah. I love.
No one ever mentions them.
I love Drive Through. Yeah, they're my favorite.
Yeah, Drive Through. I'm also like that, where I have different periods. Like, I love my childhood, but because I grew up very pop punk, very emo, I do want to sometimes just go back to like that first couple years of college, where all I did was like go follow Fall Out Boy and You Found Glory everywhere.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. My gosh.
So that makes me nostalgic, but so does my childhood, because there was so much going on in the 90s. But however, like, there are a lot of people who aren't like us. I think millennials are judged really hard for being super nostalgic. And I mean, it's not our fault. We got a lot of good stuff in our
Sure.
childhood, but we're also that last generation that kind of bridged
Right.
the gap between that post and pre-internet world. And we could definitely log on to the internet in the 90s, but you had to have some money.
Yeah.
Like, not everybody was on AOL back in the day. But do you think having lived in that before time, before the internet, kind of plays an important factor to why we're so nostalgic? Because we kind of have this old world feel to us.
That's such a beautifully put thing to say, and also a very good question. I would say that I'm not 100% sure if this is like an actual thing that happened, but there was, as far as I know, I was told by a comedian that there was a scientific study that there is a generation of between millennial and Gen Z that is called the lucky ones. And those are people who grew up without the internet, but also saw the internet become the internet when they got older.
I feel like if you were born late 80s, mid to late 80s, yes. But, well, even early 90s, if you were poor, because my brother's 93. Yeah. And I mean, my mom still doesn't have the internet in that house, so.
Sure. Yeah. No, I completely understand. Yeah, I grew up in the 90s and also very poor. So we had VHSs when everybody had DVDs. We had DVDs when everybody had Blu-rays.
Like, please stop. We're just caught up.
Yeah. I mean, I no lie, I'm pretty sure my parents got Netflix last year. So
we didn't. I remember, like, my best friend's mom got her tires fixed in the early, I think I was still in high school, so early aughts, and she got a free DVD player and just like gave it to us for Christmas because it's just like they had money, so they're just like, why do we need a DVD player? My family, I still have it. It's over 20 years, so I'm like, but it was my first DVD player. It's really exciting.
Oh my gosh. It's that's such a funny thing. Like, it reminds me, there's an old Patton Oswalt joke where he talks about how if he were to see if his future self can talk to himself, now, one of the things that he says is he goes, there's going to be a thing, this little brick that has all the music in it. And he goes, wow, that thing must cost $1 million. And he's like, no, it costs only like $100. In fact, you're gonna get so tired of them, people are just gonna give them to you in gift baskets and you're gonna throw them away. Like,
I know, like, now iPod's obsolete.
Yeah.
Like, they were so big. I got one, I think. I got a Nano or something when I graduated college, and I was like, wow, I'm living in the future finally.
Right? Yeah. The iPod was every kid's, like, if your parents couldn't afford a car for like your high school graduation or your college graduation, they're like, here's an iPod video and it's 60 gigs because we went all in. Like, we got everybody from the family to give us money to get this for you. So which I'm pretty sure was what happened to me. But yeah, like, that iPod was a big deal for me, for sure, even though kind of part of me misses kind of lugging around my giant Trapper Keeper of CDs.
I still have one in the car. It's my Backstreet Boy one from many, many years ago, and it still has a lot of Backstreet Boy singles and CDs.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I had like the giant, like, 200 CD Trapper Keeper, and like I organized everything by alphabet. I alphabetized everything, put all the covers behind the CD. Like, I mean, it was pristine, but now it's just garbage. Like,
it's just taking up space, but at the same time, we might be like the most nostalgic, but also a hoarder generation, because like I'm like, I can't get rid of these VHS tapes. I have no VCR, but I need these tapes. They're more decor now.
Right. Speaking of hoarder, man, that is such a good that's such a good way to put it, because like I'm looking in my room right now and I'm looking at Funko Pops that I have that are not going to do anything but sit there, and I have vinyl that's gonna do nothing but sit there. I have the excuse that I have a podcast about cereal, but I have way too many boxes of cereal in my room. Like I have like however much you think is too much, triple that.
I always
Like
say I think Funko Pops definitely found their people because we were like gung ho for Beanie Babies and Pogs. Like, of course, we were gonna buy up Funko Pops. It was just like
right.
tailor made for us to buy something totally useless but totally cute. Like,
Yeah. No, it's true. You're absolutely right. And it's funny because my thing is that I give myself a reason to buy these things. Like it's, and for some people it's different reasons. Like some people they're like, well, I have to buy this, I love Stranger Things, you know, like, or I have to buy this, I love XYZ, you know. But for me, my what I loved about Funko Pops was I would put them on top of my keyboard when I would play live shows, and it would always get a response, and people would always take pictures of us and tag us, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like this is like a way to get more people, you know, to kind of find out who we are and things like that, because they think that, you know, this guy's cool because he has Corey and Topanga, the Funko Pops on his, you know, keyboard. And so I would get them for that, because I would be like, oh, well, I have this, and then I got Max and Powerline, and, you know, now, you know, Fred and Barney, you know, from the Flintstones, like all these different things. And I would give myself this reason of like, oh, I am doing it because I'm playing shows. And it's like, are you really doing it for that? Like, come on,
business
man.
investment.
Yeah, you think that it's for that, but it's not. Like the same thing with the cereal boxes, where it's just like, I'm doing it for the podcast, and part of it is kind of accurate, but then the other part of it is just like, yeah, but like, what else are you gonna do with these boxes? Like there's like so many, you know, it's weird. But you're absolutely right. We are, in a weird way, a hoarder generation.
I don't know what it is. It's just like we like to have stuff. But you mentioned the reverse trauma that nostalgia is. And I often think that. I often think we're a very traumatized generation, because I remember like in first or second grade, they had the Oklahoma City bombing. And our teacher was like, write letters to the survivors. Given I was first or second grade, I have no idea what's going on in the world, but I wrote this letter. Team that with like Columbine, you have 9/11, recession after recession. We have Trump, 2020. Like, we've been through a lot.
Yeah,
you know, unprecedented events we have our fill. But do you think that all of that stacked on top of one another, we kind of, that's why we're nostalgic. We have to go back to those places that spark joy, because Jesus, we've had enough. Like, let us have our Funko Pops.
Right. I love that you said that. Man, this is great. It's like I'm talking to myself in a different universe. This is wonderful. I have had this conversation before with someone, and I usually try never to go there because like it sounds kind of dark, but you kind of halfway said what we were talking about, which is we were talking about like why they don't make sitcoms like how we used to watch them. Like, why don't they make a Family Matters anymore? Or like, why don't they make like Full House, you know, anymore? And it's like, because the audience now would think that that's cheesy. Well, why would they think that that's cheesy? Because really, pretty much after 9/11, like
the joy was gone.
Everything just became too real, you know, where it's just like, you know what? A family from San Francisco that just hugs all the time is bullshit.
And has that music like oh, Michelle's about to learn a lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, you know, I mean, anything. But and now we watch, I mean, I still love Full House because like it's very much a comfort, you know, food show for me. You know, the same with pretty much any TGIF sitcom like Boy Meets World or Family Matters, any show like that, because it reminds me of a better time, you know, in a weird way, which is strange because I was also young. Like I was also young when all those things were happening. Like I wasn't old enough to really, like I was old enough to know we are under attack, but I also wasn't old enough to be like, what does this mean? Are we gonna die now? Like it was just like, I just was like, well, I think what I thought it was, which to be fair, I don't think anybody knew it was intentional until like after, until like hours after, or and I just thought it was a guy that didn't know how to fly a plane. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Like, I
And
remember I was getting ready for school and I saw the second one and I just was like, oh no, that sucks. And I went back to like Sagwa the Chinese Kitten on PBS and was like, okay.
right.
And then I got to school and the Christian club was like standing around the flagpole, like crying and praying. And I was like, what? I asked my friend, I was like, what happened? She's like, didn't you see the news this morning? I was like, yeah, the plane crash. And then like, I had to watch Sagwa the Chinese Kitten finish.
That brought back so many memories. Freaking see you at the pole, people. That is so funny. I went to a Christian school, so like I literally, like, I mean, I grew up. Well, yeah, it was in public schools. It's like a club, right?
Yeah.
Like the Christian group is like a club or whatever. Which, like, you can kind of say that that's what being a Christian is anyway. But yeah, like I went to a Christian school and I went to a Christian college, so I was very much in a bubble growing up, which is kind of interesting as far as like my childhood and all that stuff. We can talk about that too, but because I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of things that were like on the cusp of pop culture. You know, like for example, I knew about Clueless, but it was because I saw it on TBS.
Oh.
You know, like I saw like the censored, you know, version of that movie. And I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies for a long time, well after I was 13. Wasn't allowed to watch anything involving you know, witchcraft, wizardry, you know, anything like that. So Harry Potter's out. You know, it was just weird. Like, I mean, and my best friend's a little younger than me, and he kind of went through the same thing. But what's even funnier about it is that sometimes parents are like weird about their own rules. You know, where like he had a rule in his house where he wasn't allowed to watch Harry Potter, but he could watch Wizards of Waverly Place. And he was like, it's the same thing. Like, it's just people, like, you know, and like, and his mom would just be, I don't know, that's because I said so. I don't want you to watch it, you know. So okay, great, you know. So it's strange, yeah. But I grew up watching some like, you know, things that were specific for Christians, like Veggie Tales and things like that. But I wasn't like, you know, I also kind of knew a few things. I wasn't like oblivious to things. But I think my thing is I've always wanted to know what the joke is. Like, I always want to be a part of the thing. I always want to be I want to be a part of the conversation, you know. So if that means not knowing about Ghostbusters and then having to go watch Ghostbusters because that's what people are talking about, then that's what I'm going to do, you know, or whatever, or Wikipedia Ghostbusters, whatever. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm just saying, I always want to be in the know. I want to be in the conversation. And especially as a comedian now, you know, I want to have my finger on the pulse of everything that's going on, because that's the whole thing. You're like, the whole thing is to make fun of, you know, what's going on in the world and pop culture or whatever it is that you find funny.
Well, speaking, I said we were the most traumatized, but I feel like kids today giving us a run for our money because they had to go to school during a pandemic. I can't imagine like having to be on those Zoom classrooms and everything. But I also feel like kids today don't have a lot of their own pop culture because of all the reboots and remakes or just like extension of things. It's like in 20 or so years, like we have our pops of like Topanga and Corey. We have the like, you know, we have Disney Plus to watch DuckTales. But do you think kids today aren't going to be able to process their trauma because they don't really have their own pop culture to fall back on?
What a great question. I don't know, man. I mean, it's one thing is for sure. It's gonna be like, we are going to be those annoying old parents. You know what I mean? And like, and even if it's like, you know, back in my day, we used to see each other in real life when we went to school. Like, and then like back in the day, sometimes we'd be scared that somebody would bring a gun to school. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just wild, you know, to where now, you know, in a lot of, I mean, this is again very dark, but it's just true. Like, I'm just mirroring what happens in the world. Zoom school is kind of awesome because at least I don't have to be scared that my kids might get shot.
Yeah, that's, you know what I mean? I'm saying. I would have liked Zoom school because I was a fat kid and no PE. Blessed. Hashtag blessed. I would have been like, I always was like, I was telling my husband during, 2020, I was like, because he was also a fat kid, I was like, could you imagine being at home in the 90s if they had the internet with all those Dunkaroos, all the little bags of chips? Like, my mom would have been bankrupt having to feed me. She would have found the cure, whatever it was. Yeah. She would have been like, get out of my house. But I want to move past the trauma and get back to nostalgia, because you said nostalgia can help you get to know people on a deeper level.
Sure can.
And I agree with that. I think because I didn't grow up wrapped in like my heritage of my culture or religion or anything like that. I was raised by TV, and therefore I always bond with people over pop culture. In doing your show, have you learned a sort of like, what's your most bondable thing with someone? Is it TV? Is it music, movies?
That's interesting. I would say, because I'm a lot like you in that I'm very just into all of it. Mm-hmm. You know, like I just love the culture just in general. And I can pretty much, it's part of it is my personality, but I can kind of chameleon my way to talking to pretty much anybody, because like, even like, a prisoner, in like a prison, and just like, as opposed to like, I was gonna say Azkaban, by the way. I was like, that prison, Azkaban, the one that's totally real. That's how little I know about prison. So, but I can basically be like, hey, like, what did you watch on TV? And he's like, who's the boss? And even if I don't know who's the boss, I do know who Tony Danza is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I could be like, oh yeah, Tony Danza's the bomb. And they're like, oh, Tony Danza's the bomb, man. And I'm like, you know what's great with Tony Danza? Angels in the Outfield. And then we can just keep talking about that. Mm-hmm. And then we could talk about baseball. And then Christopher Lloyd comes in for some reason. And then we can go to Back to the Future. And then before you know it, you're best friends, and that's it. Like, I mean, I don't know. It is very surface level, of course, but it is like the easiest for me. It is the easiest surface level way for me to like talk to someone and then kind of get a gauge if I want to waste my time being their friend. Like, because like you kind of find out who someone is by what TV they watch.
Oh, for sure. I judge people on that. I'm like, I don't care if you are, what race you are, what your sexuality, blah, 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 religion, but what you watch is what I'm going to judge you on. Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't know. I don't want to like throw any shows under the bus or anything.
Oh, God, like, drag them.
But it's just like, if anybody watches more reality TV than they watch fictional TV, I already don't trust you. You know what I mean? Like,
it just depends, because there is a golden age of reality when VH1 was doing all the Flavor of Love, Rock of Love, that trashy celebrity dating. Yeah. When I was beautiful, and I love RuPaul's Drag Race, but if you're watching like all the Housewives.
But again, this is all different, because like I agree with you. There is like trashy reality shows that are really fun to watch.
Like, because, I get it.
Because you're watching something that's on fire. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just like, wow, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe there's cameras here, but then there's like reality shows where it's like these like dating, like,
Love Island.
Like, hey,
let's blind. There's a lot of love.
Yeah, like can you smell the love? Like, you know, like all these, I mean, so freaking stupid. They're like, we did everything we could. I'm just gonna pitch a show. We blindfolded these people and taped their mouths shut. The only thing they can do is smell their partner. Will they find love? I'm Ryan Seacrest. Like,
I mean,
what are we doing?
You're joking, but Netflix is like, that sounds amazing.
Well, they listen every week, Kendra. I do know.
I mean, they're picking it up. I think that's how they get their show. They just throw words at a wall and they're like, dating show, cooking show. Except I do love, is it cake?
Yeah. Is it cake? Is it cake kind of makes me mad.
Because you're like, is it? And then because you're gonna binge it all, and then for the next week you're like, I don't know if I'm cake.
Yeah,
or you're cake.
Yeah. For the next, you're 100% right. For the next week, you don't trust inanimate objects anymore.
No.
Like,
I don't trust anything. People,
you're just like,
dog.
My entire shelf might be a cake.
Then I got arrested for going and just stabbing everything.
Yeah, because I thought everything was cake. No, officer, see, your partner is not a person. He's cake. And they're just like, that's my partner. No. Like,
Really
awful. Yeah, but I mean, sure, there's great stuff. I mean, there's great reality. Like, I mean, who doesn't love Nailed It, and who doesn't adore Nicole Byer? Like, I love Nicole Byer, and I will watch any trash that she's on because I love her beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like, she's one of my favorite people in the entire world. But that's just the thing. Like, you know, I don't know, if somebody to me is just very like, yeah, I'm a Kardashians person, like I watch, you know, too much of, you know, all the housewife things, you know, whatever, then I'm just like, all right, man, I'm disengaged. And to be honest, and this is also very weird because I am a man, but if I talk to a dude and all they care about is sports, get out of my life. like get out of my life. I don't care. You are a giant bowl of who cares. Like, I mean, it is just ridiculous. Like, nobody should care about something that much, you know. But at the same time, I do love things that are fake that much, so I get it. But like, I don't know.
I'm gonna judge, but I'm also in the same boat.
Yeah, well, of course, we're the best way to put it.
But don't get it.
Yeah, the best way to put it is we're all nerds. We're just nerds about different things.
Yeah. Like,
I might be a nerd about the Avengers or whatever the case, but you just like basketball a lot, you know, and that's your thing. You know, that doesn't mean you're not a nerd. You know, you're wearing a shirt with another guy's name on it. You know what I mean? Like, you're definitely a dork. You know, like.
I mean, for me, I do have a Charlie Conway hoodie. That's like as sporty as I get. It's got to be like a kid's awesome. Sports movie. That's like the kind of sports I'm into. Real sports.
How funny is that? So we're like, how funny is that? We're like, sports are so like I could just care less about sports, but if it's a movie about sports, and especially if it's involving children or an animal, I'm into it. Like. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me this dog can play basketball? I'm in.
And go to space and cure AIDS and cancer. And, you know, the buddies are doing a lot.
Yeah, and also help Santa. Calm down. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things. I haven't seen Cancer Buddies yet, but where they cure cancer, but they do a lot of stuff.
That one's their, like, A24 drama. Gonna get real. I think Brendan Fraser is going to play their owner.
Oh my gosh, that would be the best. By the way, this is the perfect place to talk about this. I love the renaissance that Brendan Fraser is getting now.
I mean, he is everywhere right now. He's gonna win the Oscar. I mean, George of the Jungle is going to win a freaking Oscar. Encino Man is going to win an Oscar.
Yeah.
You know, congrats.
Well, and not only that, like, you have to look at it like this, like, Key was also in Encino Man as well, and he's been winning for supporting for Everything Everywhere All at Once. So if the two of them win, oh my gosh, it's every 90s kid's dream.
The Goonies is my top 10 favorite movie. So every time even Corey Feldman, every time there's a Goonie winning in life, I'm like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. Even Corey Feldman, that horrible music.
Yeah, you're like the only fan of Corey Feldman's music.
No, I mean, I follow him and I'm like, please stop posting those. And he's doing like a Comic-Con near me, and I'm like, $70 for a photo though? I can't.
Yikes.
I know, I love you, mouth, but ooh, that's a lot. But moving on, you drew this wonderful like parallel between nostalgia and a typical crush, and this idea of viewing them as perfect. And we like wear these rose-colored glasses when we like are sprung on a new crush. And I do think that does cross over when we look at the past. And you said we have these nostalgia eyes. Why do you think we do view the past and all of that with these like hearts in our eyes? Like, how can we not see? Because I always think of like my mom in the 90s. Like, I was having the time of my life, you know, watching Price is Right when I didn't go to school, but my mom was probably like stressing about money and all this, so I don't know what being an adult was like then. So what do you think that, like, why do we have those hard eyes?
I think that right there is exactly why, because when we're an adult, we are now that mom that is looking at the bills. We are now that mom that, you know, this is kind of a vulnerable and fun story, or like cutesy kind of story, but this is the difference between a kid and an adult. I found out like maybe like 5 years ago from my I can't remember how long ago it was. It was maybe close to like 7 or 10 years ago, something like that. It was before I moved to Los Angeles, and I was selling a bunch of stuff. And now one of the things that I have a lot of in my house is action figures. I had a lot of Power Ranger action figures, and like, you know, the Megazord, and like all these different, you know, all the weapons, everything. So I was like, oh, let me sell these to a comic book shop and like make some money, because it'll help me out. And my mom was just like, no. Why? And I go, because it's just junk. Like, I'm not like, what are we saving this for? Like, I don't have a son. Like, what are we saving this for? And she's like, no, we're not doing that, like, at all. And I was just like, all right. And I was like really, really frustrated with my mom for the longest time. And it turns out I come home for Christmas the next year, and my aunt is telling me, she goes, Mikey, do you remember when you were 8, you had a Power Rangers birthday? And I go, yeah, I do remember. That's like one of my favorite birthday parties of all time was my mom, you know, called some party place, and they had like the Power Rangers come to my house and like play games and stuff like that. It was fun. And you know, then she started telling me some stories, and granted, if you're younger than a millennial, this might not seem as important, so I'll explain why it's important. When I was a kid, there used to be stores where they sold toys. And you couldn't just like fart on your phone and get whatever you wanted delivered to your house in 3 hours, you know. So and also the other thing is, if it ran out and it was over, you know. And I really wanted this like Megazord thing, and you know, I can't remember exactly what I wanted, but it was, you know, she was talking about it, and she goes, man, we waited in this line for hours before this Toys R Us opened, and my mom ended up getting trampled.
Oh my God.
Like no lie, like, I'm not being cute, I'm not embellishing.
No, tickle me Elmo, like,
was literally like trampled and stepped over because a bunch of people wanted to get, you know, this Megazord thing. It was essentially like the plot to Jingle All the Way. Like, it was the Turbo Man, you know. And they ended up getting the last, no, they didn't. They couldn't get it, so they actually had to like call a guy like it was like a drug deal. I'm serious. Like it's wild how what would happen in the 90s for toys.
Yeah.
And like I'm not kidding. Like she took my aunt. My aunt was telling me this story. My mom still has no idea that my aunt told me this story. And opens the trunk, shows them the toy, and she paid like I think $50 or $60 more than it was worth or something, just because the next day she wanted, maybe not the next day, but the next week or whatever it was Christmas, and she wanted to be like, hey, Santa got this for you, and that was it. And when I'm a kid, it's just like you see the toy and you're like, wow, thanks mom, or thanks Santa, and that's it. You don't see the pain and the hours of patience and the possible hurt and the possible price gouging and fear and all that stuff. You don't see that when you're a kid. All you see is the toy. So, and of course you're excited and you love your parents and all that stuff. But I heard that story and it made me respect my mom on the highest level humanly possible, because it was just like the fact that you would do that for a kid means that the fact that you do that for anyone means you love them, because also my mom is not very vocal with her words. Like I said, she's that stereotypical dad in a 50s movie about a kid with a dream. Like it's just like, I won't say I love you, you'll never see me cry until my deathbed. Like she's that type of person, and so she's never expressed that through words. But that story made me realize like she has over expressed that through actions, and that's a way more important thing. So I think that's the difference in a roundabout way. That is the difference between like a kid having like the heart eyes, but then being an adult and being like, yeah, but this is the real world, and like this is what happens when you want that kid to have those heart eyes and remember those moments, and things like that. It's very real.
It's a very sweet story. Shout out to your mom for getting trampled for Megazord. My mom was not that hardcore. She actually was like, she would be like buying all this stuff for me, and then like when it came time to me growing up, she's like, all right, get rid of it. And I'm like, but it's mine. So I still tell her, like, remember when you made me like give away my Talk Girl?
Yeah.
Or all my Goosebumps and my Babysitter's Club books. I was really upset about that. And I went to college and I had to pack up all my Backstreet Boys stuff and put it in her shed, and she let rats get it. And I was like really upset, and I was like, wow. Well, that was like a lot of money you spent, Mom, so you should be way more upset.
Wow.
But
that's nuts.
So we usually wrap up this portion with, what you think your life would be like with your crush, but your crush is nostalgia. So I'm going to do something different based on your 5 senses. We're going to do a speed round. So I'm going to say one of the senses, and you tell me what makes you the most nostalgic. Like touch for me would be like a koosh ball.
Okay.
All right. So
I love this. I love this so much.
So we're going to start with sound, or like hearing, I guess.
Okay, sound. I'll just go with this. Just tried and true. The Full House theme song. Let's do that.
It takes you to Friday night. It takes you to happy family moments that maybe you didn't have in your own home. Yeah. That was what Full House and TJF was for me. I didn't have like stability. So every week I'd have these families that were like pretty normal.
Right.
They grounded me before I watched 2020. All right. Sight.
What would you say is yours?
For sight, what do I see? And I just think, if I see like a building that looks like an old circuit city, and I know it's an old circuit city because they're very distinct.
That's very good, because mine would probably be if I see a building that has the old Blockbuster like filth on it. And you're just like, yeah, that's a T-Mobile now, but it definitely used to be a Blockbuster.
There are some towns that still, they're just like, why take it down? It's a perfectly good structure.
Yeah.
All right, smell.
Smell, what would you say is yours?
Always school supplies. It's I'm a nerd in that regard as well. I love school.
Nice.
I love it's something my grandma also really loves. So I think I just got it from her.
You know what? I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this story. I I had a friend who she lives up north, and she maybe like an hour or so from me, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to go to Carvel?" And I was like, "I haven't been to a Carvel since I was a little kid." And I went in there, and the smell brought me back to when I was a little kid getting out of karate practice. I'm not kidding. I cried. Like I was like, oh my God, I've never had this feeling before. Like this is, so I think my answer is Carvel.
That's a good one. What about taste? Probably Carvel. I don't know.
You know what? It wouldn't be taste. It would just be the smell. Because the thing is, it's not the smell of the ice cream. It's the smell of the store. And every store has one. Like it smells like freezers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it just smells like freezers, and for some reason it just reminded me of like, so I went to this karate class, and the karate class right in front of my karate school was a Carvel, and to the right was a Toys R Us. Like, and it was inside this like giant, like kind of indoor mall. So you could kind of, you know, after karate practice, you can like go to a Toys R Us and like, you know, hang out with your karate buddies, or go get a scoop of ice cream or whatever. It was pretty much like the best place to hang out when you were like 6 or whatever. Man, taste. I gotta go tried and true. I gotta go cereal.
Any particular?
Yeah. I would say it doesn't exist, but you can recreate it if you're crazy. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cereal, which is essentially just Chex cereal, with Lucky Charms marshmallows on them.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's very good.
And what about touch?
I would say Nickelodeon Gak.
Ooh, that's a smell too, because it stinks.
It smells like a butt.
Yeah.
It smells so bad.
I always had just like silly putty. That was my thing. I didn't like we had really old shag carpet, so we weren't allowed to have things that could like stick just because our carpet was busted already. My mom was like, no more, like.
Yeah.
But so I would have silly putty, and she'd be like, "Oh, you know a cool trick? Put it over the comic strip on the funnies." And I'd be like, "Wow, Mom, that's magical." So now we talked about the crush. Now it's time to talk more about you and all these creative endeavors you got going on, which isn't too far from your crush, your podcast, Childlike At Best with Mike Valdes. You kicked off that a handful of years ago before we all jumped on the podcast bandwagon during Rona. So being a comedian, do you feel that it was like a natural path to venture down?
You know, it's funny. I didn't do it because I'm a comic and I have to have a podcast. I kind of just did it because I love podcasts. Like it's my favorite media. So like more than watching TV and movies, like I'd much rather watch or listen to a podcast, because I love watching people or hearing people talk, you know, and just talk about stuff and like being funny with each other and like, you know, things like that. And I wanted to just, you know, create that. And one of the things that I've always been fascinated by is childhood. I've always been fascinated by people's childhood. I've always been fascinated with nostalgia. And I was like, man, why don't I just make a show about this? And granted, this was years before, because now this is like a thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like now it's weird because, like, you know, there's Vanessa Bayer has How Did We Get Weird, which is essentially Childlike At Best with famous people in it, and then they have those iHeartRadio like Boy Meets World watch-alongs, and they have with the cast of Boy Meets World, and Hey Dude, the 90s Called, and the the Lance Bass podcast,
Frosted Tips.
Frosted Tips, like all these different things. where it's just like, dude, I've been talking about this since before you guys even thought about doing a podcast. Like, so like, but I mean, to be fair, like, it's not like I invented talking about nostalgia or anything like that. But what I'm saying is people do want to hear it. You know, people, there is definitely an audience for it, you know, and so that's kind of what got me into it. And like, you know, I don't have very many questions on that podcast. I kind of just let the interview go where it goes. And I basically only really have 5 questions, and you'd be surprised at how much I get to know people with just 5 questions, you know. And it's just because, like, you know, and granted, you know, if they say something, you know, and it leads to a tangent or whatever, I will ask about certain things. But the tried and true questions are always, where did you grow up? Who did you sit with at the lunch table? What were your favorite snacks? And what advice would you give to your younger self? And what would your younger self think of who you are now? And that's it. That's literally,
the last one's hard.
Yeah, which is a difficult question, and it gets a lot of people, you know. It's one of those things that when I discovered that question, I was like, well, I need to remind people that there is no wrong answer. Like, you don't, if you want to joke out, you can. Because I talk to a lot of comedians, and comedians don't want to be emotional sometimes, you know. You don't have to be emotional if you don't want to. There's no wrong answer. But most of the time, people are very vulnerable, and they will answer it, you know, for like in a serious way. And I love that, because it all started with me asking myself that, you know, as an actor, you know, here's the story about, you know, it kind of ties all together. But I went out for this audition for something, and in my head I was like, I am not gonna get this. This is like some cattle call thing for some like Uber Eats Starbucks commercial. And I was like, I'm never gonna get this. Like, why am I wasting my time? All this stuff. And I went in, and it was a group audition, and I don't do well with group auditions. I only do well with myself, and that's it. And for some strange reason, in that group audition, whatever it was that I was doing, they sent everyone else home, but they liked me, and they called me back. So then they called me back, but they still had like maybe 30 to 50 people left to figure out, you know, who was going to be, you know, in this commercial. So I was like, again, I went again, and I was even more mad, because I'm like, now I'm wasting my time again, because now, like, yeah, they might think I'm funny or whatever because they laughed at my first audition or whatever. But sometimes, you know, you hear about these casting directors, they'll just bring you in never wanting to hire you. They just want to laugh because, you know, they're bored or whatever, and they're like, well, at least this guy will be funny, you know. And so I thought that's what they were doing to me. I was like, oh, they're just gonna have me there to like make them laugh, and then they'll send me home and not give me any money, you know. So, and then I told myself, listen, man, when you were a kid, you would have killed for this. Like, this is the thing you wanted to do, and you're doing it. You know, like, what would that 8-year-old that wanted to be an actor, who saw October Sky for the first time and decided, I want to do that. I want to be an actor. I want to be someone, you know, in movies. I want to be in a TV show, or I want to be on a Nickelodeon show or a Disney Channel show or whatever. And, you know, now you've been on Nickelodeon. You've been on Disney Channel. You've worked with people that have, you know, that you would have never thought of when you were 8 years old, you know, you worked with. And now you're just sitting here complaining about not getting some stupid commercial. Like, who cares if you don't get it, you know? And so that's kind of why and in a weird way, it's kind of sparked up the magic again, because in this business, and not even in this business, in this life, you kind of forget about the magic. When you're a kid, that's all you live off of. When you're a kid, you don't need to go to space because you have a giant box and you can just pretend, when you're a kid, and granted, I don't know how it is for kids now, because now, kids have iPhones.
Just on Roblox.
Yeah, they have a bunch of different technology than I did. All I had was a box, but I love that box because it was a spaceship, and it was also my home that I can bring other girls from my preschool in, and we could play house, or like whatever, and that's just, yeah. So essentially what I'm saying is, like, that sense of childlike wonder, is usually gone in a lot of people, because the real world kind of brings you down. The world is filled with a lot of people that say no all the time. And when people say no, you start to get jaded, you start to get callous.
Yeah.
And you start to be like, well, if I harden up and I don't care about my emotions, then it won't hurt so much because I'm always getting no's, right? But at the end of the day, you being vulnerable was what would have made them say yes. So you do need to find that magic in some way, shape, or form, and that magic can be different for other people than me. For me, it's not losing my sense of childlike wonder and talking to myself, talking to the childhood version of myself. For some people, it is literally talking to their actual kids, because that's how they do everything. They do everything for their children, or it's talking to their wife or their husband or whatever. Everybody has something different, but whatever it is, find that, because that magic is what's going to make sure that you are sane, essentially, that your life isn't in vain, because this is a song lyric that I love. It's an Amber Lynn song lyric, but I use it all the time, where he says, the greatest tragedy is not your death, but it's a life without reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because if life has no reason, then life has no purpose, so find that purpose and find that magic, and that's why I always tell people, don't lose your sense of childlike wonder.
Well, speaking of not losing that magic, you mentioned that you have a new season coming up.
Yes.
Like, what can we expect? When can we expect it? What's going on with Childlike At Best?
That's a great question. So, Childlike at Best was picked up by a podcast network called Big Comedy Network, which is really awesome. I'm excited about that. I have some really cool people coming up. The first episode is going to be Jason Marsden from A Goofy Movie and Spirited Away, all the TGIF sitcoms. He plays the quintessential best friend. I told this to him to his face. I said, you're so good at playing the best friend that in Boy Meets World, your character's name was Jason Marsden. Like, that's how good you are at playing the best friend.
I think he's a big crush around here because of Goofy Movie.
I mean, yeah, it's wild. We actually talk about that, to kind of tease it. He's been doing stand-up lately, and he did a show where a girl went on before him and was talking about her first crush. And had an entire bit about how her first crush was Max Goof, and he was just sitting there like, what? Like, she had no idea that he was there. So, like, she's just like doing this bit about like how she had this crush on Max Goof, and he's like, just there, like.
I feel like he looked like that Lisa Simpson meme where she's kind of like looking down, like surprised, like, ooh.
Yeah. No, for sure, absolutely, yeah. But Mars is so awesome. I love Mars. He's really cool. And Barrett Letty is another guest. he's on so many shows, man. He's a voice actor, and he does, I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh, the new Pokemon series. I mean, so many different things that he's been doing. And past guests are also really great too, don't get me wrong. Like, I had Mark Blutman, the head writer of Boy Meets World. I had Philip Wilburn from he's been on How I Met Your Mother and Dragon Ball Z. I mean, I've had some cool people. Robbie Rist, the voice of Michelangelo on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, you can't go wrong, man. Like, I've had some cool people. I'm very lucky.
Well, you've had cool people, but you also have really cool merch. You have this one with like a Viewmaster, and I mean, it's a staple of a child's bedroom, probably up until 97, 98. I mean, we were living for those little discs of wonder. But do you think if they re-released the Viewmaster today with newer movies, which one do you think would make like the best Viewmaster experience?
Oh man, I mean, I know what the answer is, but I don't want it to be this movie. Like, the answer is Avatar, but I don't want it to be that movie because I didn't like it.
Well, for you, what would be the best experience for you? Because I don't like Avatar.
Oh, for me, I mean, it would be Back to the Future, but like that's
like a movie from today.
Oh, a movie,
last 20 years.
Okay, let's see. I mean, so this is such a funny thought experiment because like, to imagine like, what if, because like they had trading cards and all that stuff, like just imagine like Fast and the Furious trading cards.
I would love a Fast and Furious Viewmaster experience.
It's actually kind of cool, not gonna lie.
They all just say family. It just spells it out, and then it says it, and then it's just Vin Diesel.
Yeah, it comes with a sticker and a really old piece of gum.
Family.
Family. Yeah, they all that's great. It comes with 6, and they all, in the back, they all spell out family. That'd be cool. That'd be cool. So, I don't know about. I mean, the movies that I like are very like. Nostalgia heavy or like older, but man, I'm trying to think. I mean, here's a good answer just because it's funny. A great Viewmaster Rolodex would just be the Whale. just Brendan Fraser and the Whale. That's it.
I mean, if I was like the Oscars team in my goodie bag, I'd be like, let's do Viewmasters of the nominated movies for Best Picture. Like, put a still in each one. I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once would be a really cool one.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. That's a great one. I mean, the fact that they're not giving out like those like googly eyes is kind of ridiculous.
Missed
they should be putting googly eyes on everything.
That's what if I was her, because you're gonna win. She knows she's gonna win. There's no way she's not. I would wear a googly eye dress.
That's fun.
I would. That's how I would rock it.
That's really fun. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm definitely that type of person where like of course I want to look nice and things like that, but I also like kind of want to troll people.
I like
if that makes any sense. Yeah, like for example, if I were Chris Pratt and I was playing Super Mario, when I went to an award show, I would wear a suit that looked like Super Mario going inside of a tube, and then whenever I bend down, it looks like I'm actually going down a tube. Like, I would totally do that.
Missed opportunities, these celebrities. So what about I know you have the new season coming, but any new music on the horizon? Because I gotta say, when I hear comedian, podcaster, I don't think musician on top of that.
Sure.
But everyone, check out Mike Valdes and the Noise. Good stuff.
That's very sweet. Thank you so much. It's I'm always writing, and I love music like nobody's business. But it's just something that it's more a hobby now. Like I still play and I still have my band and I still write and things like that.
but it's more on the back burner, just because the next thing that I want to make, I want it to be amazing, and so in fact, one of my crushes that I wanted to do on this podcast was Donald Glover. He's a giant talent crush that I have, because he was the first person that made me realize you can do anything and everything, and be good at all of it. He's perfect. Yeah, I can't. When it comes to art, there's nothing I could find wrong with that guy.
My friend went to NYU and was a year apart from him when he got the job writing for 30 Rock, and to this day he's still like, that could have been me. I'm like, that could have, honey. I was gonna ask, you're a musician, actor, podcaster, all these things. How do you think all of them kind of help you with your show? Because I know, like, being a freelance writer and doing like interviews through emails, that's what helps me, set up questions here. So how does all of that help with your podcast?
So I say this a lot, but I view performing as a 20-sided die. And so, like, to use kind of nerdy terms, and like, you're using little pieces of like your social skills and like your comedy skills and your acting skills and, all these different things. And that's creating who you are as a podcaster, or as a performer, or as a singer, or whatever it is that you're doing. And so my whole thing is like, I just want to be like, no matter what, even if I'm interviewing the most boring person, I want to be entertaining, so I think the best, I think the person that I look up to when it comes to that is Conan O'Brien, because
high five, have to high five with that.
Because Conan can make a paper bag seem interesting. Like, I mean, that dude is so good at like getting the most boring person who has the worst story of all time, and they think it's the greatest thing ever because they're on some hot sitcom that everyone's watching. And he can actually make the story funny, and it isn't in this like, and all due respect to David Letterman, because I love David Letterman, but the thing about Letterman was he was very like sarcastic about it. Like, he was very like, oh, did you go camping? Oh, cool. Did you now? Like, to where it's like Conan would be like, you went camping? Man, I could never do that. I get really scared whenever I'm taking a shower next to a bear, like, and then and that's why it's funny. Like, and he puts himself in the situation, and you're like, oh my God, dude, like, Conan is the best.
My favorite thing Conan does is when he goes, oh, a little bit about you, but more about back to me. Like, when he does that little, it's like my favorite thing he does.
Yeah, he's very like, he no one that when he makes a joke, he's not making the person the butt of the joke. He makes himself the butt of the joke in a lot of ways, which is why I think it works, but he's also not self-deprecating, like, he's not like, he doesn't say stuff that's like sad, if that makes any sense. Like, he's very like, again, like, it's like, I made it up, but like, it is very much like, camping's crazy because like, I would hate to have to shower next to a bear, like, and it's not a real thing, but it's just a funny thing to imagine, like a 6'6" white guy with red hair taking a shower with a bear in the woods. You know what I mean? It's just funny to think about that, so yeah. And like, I mean, like I said, he's just very good at like, so him, and like, here's another one as well. I kind of take a little bit from him, and he gets a little bit of flack, but I love Jimmy Fallon as well. And like, the reason why I love Jimmy Fallon is because Jimmy Fallon is the perfect cheerleader. He's so good at making whatever stupid movie you're promoting become like the greatest thing that's ever been. Like, because that's his job. His job is to make you think Jumanji 3 is going to be the best movie you've ever seen.
I I mean, I think it will be if they're making it. I love the
No, I know, but what I'm saying is like that's his job. Like his like he's like a lot of people think like, well, he's fake. Like Kevin Hart comes on and he's just like, saw Jumanji, loved it. Like, what do you think he's gonna say? Saw Jumanji, hated it. Like, what do you think he's gonna do? Like he's there to like, you know,
raise
boost
you up.
people up. Yeah, he's there to boost you up and boost up, you know, all kinds of stuff. So so my whole thing that I thought when I interview people, especially when I was starting, because when I was starting I was mostly just interviewing people I knew. You know, now it's gotten to a point where I'm interviewing like kind of strangers, but I know you through Instagram, or I know you because you wrote my favorite TV show, or I know you because you're the voice of my favorite Disney movie, or like, you know, things like that, but I don't know you, you know, type of interview. But my thought was always, no matter who you're talking to, always treat them like they're worth $1 million, because you just never know. Because you never know who anybody's going to become, especially in the entertainment business. You never know who anybody's going to become. You never know what people are going to say about you behind your back, good or bad, you know, and you just don't want to be on the back end of it, because the entertainment business is a lot smaller than you think it is. You know, fun fact, I was doing a commercial maybe like right before the pandemic. Yeah, right before the pandemic, I was doing a Home Depot commercial where I was the lead, and the AD of the shoot remembered me because she was an AD when I was an extra 15 years ago.
Oh wow, 15 years.
She goes, and she was like, yeah, you were in the background of that high school commercial that we did for T-Mobile like a long time ago, right? And I go, yeah, that was my first job. How do you still remember me? And she's like, oh, you were really funny and you were really nice, so I just remember. And it's just like, that's all I can do. You know, at the end of the day, I tell myself as an actor, you don't even have to be funny. Just be nice and do your job. You know, know your lines, be nice, do your job, go home, you know. But I do like to be funny. So I will say, you know, part of it for me is also like, be funny, you know. But, you know, and what was great was like, you know, one of my favorite things, you know, whenever I do commercials or like or music videos or anything, whenever I get the crew to be like, dude, you're awesome, that's when I know that I won. You know, because like if the crew loves you, then you're gonna keep working, because that's who keeps coming back. You know, the crew is who keeps coming back. You know, it's not the actors. Yeah, it's nice to have actor friends and things like that, but like the actors aren't the ones casting you. You know, the people behind the scenes are the ones that are casting you, and they're going to be the ones talking about how you were a diva on set, or no, man, you need to hire this guy because he's super funny. And like, you know, I remember during that that shoot, we were the whole point of it was I was gardening. I was like putting water on my garden, and I was so like enthralled by something that I wasn't paying attention to the hose, and then the hose started then spraying like my furniture, you know. And so I said, why don't we do a shot where, because it was getting a laugh and it was fine, and they were like, we want to do something more ridiculous. And I was like, how about, and then I said, how about this? How about I get like so amazed that I don't realize it, and then the water starts spraying my face. and so they were like, yeah, like, are you okay with it? And they go, yeah, absolutely. You kidding? And then they like changed the water pressure, because the water pressure was very like high. It was very like
aggressive.
The speed was very aggressive. Exactly. Yeah. And they were adjusting it, and I go, no, don't change it. We're doing the exact the exact same thing, and we're doing this because we love comedy. and that's why we're doing this. And the entire crew went, yes. Like, I mean, I got like this, like, I mean, it was like my Rudy moment. Like, they could have put me on their shoulders. Like, they were like, I love this kid. Like, because apparently that day there was like other people that were like being kind of like
diva.
They were just being, they were being hard to work with. Yeah, they were being hard to work with, you know, in the sense of like, you know, giving them ideas or like, you know, wanting to do things that were a little out of the box to be funny. And I was like, no, dude, if we're gonna do this, it's for comedy. And the only and I said this as a joke, but I was like, but I said to the director, I said, we're gonna shoot this, but you have to promise me this is definitely gonna be the commercial. Like, you can't just like cut this, you know. But of course I was kidding. But yeah, like, that's the kind of thing that I try to do. Is like, I try to, you know, I try to just bring, you know, bring joy and all that stuff into interviews and into all that kind of stuff. You know, I think it's helpful in all of it, you know.
You always bring that childlike wonder.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the point.
And before we wrap up, can you remind people where they can find all this childlike wonder and greatness from you online?
Yes, absolutely. So, like I said in the very beginning, the easiest way to find me is if you go to thekidfromup.com. That's going to have everything. That's going to have my Instagram, my TikTok, my podcast, all that stuff. But if you don't want to do that, that's completely fine. You can find my band, Mike Valdes The Noise. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Music, everywhere you listen to music. The name of the album is Dreamer. I have a podcast called Childlike At with Mike Valdes. The first season is out. It's about 75 episodes. And season 2 is coming out hopefully at the beginning of next month. And let's see, what else? What did I forget? Oh, Childlike Wonder merch. If you go to childlikewonder.co, all of my merch is there. I have the Viewmaster tee. It's also a crew neck. I have an awesome t-shirt with me as a cartoon that says Mike Valdes, comedy's favorite cartoon. And then I have just a couple of, like, if you grew up Christian type of stuff. Like, I have a shirt that says church camp on it. I have a shirt that says unspoken prayer request on it. You know, just stuff like that. So yeah, that's me. That's everything.
To you in a nutshell. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your crush on nostalgia and so much more. And everyone, you can find all of his information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.